books shape the human heart before they shape human history.
Welcome to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. My name is Mike Baines, and I'm your host. Today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to. My guest is Matthew Runals, an active duty Army chaplain, a husband, a father of three, and a Christian fiction author whose stories are shaped by real people, real pain, and real hope. If you've ever wondered what it looks like to serve as a moral compass in difficult places, or how faith, discipline, and imagination intersect, this conversation will resonate with you. Matthew writes dystopian fiction that isn't about spectacle, but about identity, community, adoption, courage, and truth. His characters, many of them young, are believable because they're drawn from life, from mentorship, and from a deep understanding of what boys, men, and families are longing for today. Before we begin, let me say this. This podcast exists because of you. If you find value here, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, or leaving a comment. Engagement helps this podcast reach readers who are looking for stories that matter, stories that point somewhere eternal. Let's get into this conversation and welcome Matthew Runals to the audience. I'd like you to help me welcome Matthew Runals. Did I say that right?
You got it. Well done, sir.
All right. Help me welcome Matthew to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. I'm kind of excited about this interview because I've been watching some of the things that Matthew posts on his Facebook page. And I know from the get-go he's a fun guy.
Well, I hope my kids can say the same thing.
At this age, your kids have no choice.
That's right.
I put my kids through a lot, and I guess I still do.
Yeah.
Anyway, Matthew, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me on, Mike. My name is Matthew Runals. I'm a active duty Army chaplain here stationed at Fort Eustis, Newport News, Virginia. And I've been in the active duty capacity for about 10 years and then 5 additional years before all that in the Army Reserve. Married to my wife, Dana. Very first time I saw her at the Ultimate Frisbee field, I knew I was going to marry her before I even spoke to her. So, and then we have 3 beautiful kids, 7, 5, and 3 years old. So we timed them out perfectly so that when they get a little bit older, we won't have to pay for a babysitter. But,
smart.
But yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, that's very interesting. I met my wife at an Ultimate Frisbee field.
Yep.
That's not everyone can say that.
No, and it was also perhaps a little interesting is I'm 6'4", okay? At the time, I weighed about, the heaviest I ever was as an adult, I was 300 pounds. I was morbidly obese and really was convicted to lose a lot of that weight and went from 300 to about 250 and then finally settled down to 197. And today's Wednesday, so I'm at about 227, 230. Friday tends to be my leanest, and then Monday I gain some of that weight back. But and my wife, though, so I'm 6'4". My wife is about 5'2". So opposites definitely attract.
Yeah, yeah, I could relate to that. Well, that's amazing. I was at the gym this morning and talked to a guy for the first time, and he's just kind of a pencil-like looking guy. And I said, "Man, we've been watching you over the months, and you've been losing a lot of weight." He said, "I've lost 135 pounds."
That's terrific. Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for people that can have that kind of mental fortitude and stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah. Well, it was tough. It was tough. I met my wife. So we were living in Lynchburg, and I was working at Liberty University at the time. And I was actually a Title IX civil rights class 3 investigator, titles upon titles, but I was a Title IX investigator and substance abuse advisor. I worked in the dean of students office, and she was a student there, and I kept on looking up the regulations to see if everything was kosher with that. But it was, and she was a senior anyways, so she was about to graduate. But it's been a blessing, to serve God in the capacity that I was at Liberty University, but also as a Army chaplain. It's not to compare myself personally to him, but it's very similar to being a Daniel. You're serving often unbeliever, and even if they are a believer, as a commander, they have plenty of other obligations to command and provide that, the mission end state. And here I am, I'm placed in a position to be the moral compass of the unit. And so it's a very interesting dynamic. And, I've been blessed with a wonderful wife that can support me in that capacity. And a military spouse is very, very different, very, very unique. And I'll share this brief, story. Since moving here, we moved to Newport News back in July. This is the first time in 10 years that I've been with my family for 6 months straight without being gone or anything like that. And before that, we've moved 3 times in 2 years. So my family's been going through a lot of transition. And this summer, the third book of my trilogy, A Nation Found, should be coming out. But it's just been a blessing upon blessing with just how God leads his people, puts them, in the season of life that they are in for. So,
yeah. Well, and I have a lot of respect for an Army chaplain, because if you ever want to find a group of people that will reject you, go to the Army.
Yeah.
I can it's very vivid in my mind. One morning at muster in South Korea, the first shirt came out and was very upset because the chaplain had told him that some of his people, or that hardly any of his people, were going to his chapel services.
Yeah.
And I've never been dressed down for not worshiping God where God's name was taken in vain.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a dichotomy there. Maybe I better go to chaplain's service there and see what he's saying. But anyway, you do have a tough job, and I admire people that stick with it and understand you have a mission there.
Yeah. Well, it's very humbly to do so. So,
and I'm sure that every once in a while you see light come on in someone's eyes that they've found Jesus and they're on the road to salvation. That's got to be gratifying, I know.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, just right now, even though I'm at the brigade level, which is a little bit higher, I'm mentoring and discipling a young soldier, weekly with just a one-on-one Bible study. And, the chapel service that my family supports is primarily to those younger soldiers. And we have, 60 to 80 soldiers and volunteers attend weekly. And they're just very much involved in the service. I mean, it's the soldiers that make up the band, that volunteered to set it up. And so it's just been a unique blessing where we are right now. And there's especially now, people, especially the younger generation, seem to be very spiritually curious. And so be able to ask them very specific questions. Hey, what do you believe in? And if you believe in this, what's the domino effect of that belief system, and how does that set you up? And it's been extremely rewarding to be involved in the crossroads of their life, and we in previous units, I used to host a event called Chilling with the Chaplain. And because it's a corny name, it went well, you know what I mean?
Oh,
But,
sure. Yeah.
we would offer lunch and we would have, 20 to 30 soldiers come. And it was a nonstop question, kind of let me stump the chump type of format where the soldiers would ask me questions, and sometimes it was religious and sometimes it was more philosophical, but nonetheless, they're curious. They want to know.
Yeah.
And importantly, what's happening is families today are just not as connected as they used to be. And so you have this unique dichotomy where even if the biological parents never separated, the amount of involvement that the parents had in their child's life might have been less than perhaps of what it was before. Um, and so, for a lot of soldiers, they join the military to escape their family. They join the military to escape some form of trauma or tribulation. And they come to a setting such as the military. And what happens? They find leaders that hopefully will mentor them and disciple them and just train them up for life. And so again, they're very curious to how the world is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, a lot of them are very tired of this, everything is true and this relative world that has been built, and they want something tangible. They want some order. And that's one of the subtle themes within, my book series, especially book one, which is titled Lepidus. And to make a long story short, it's a dystopian setting. The families cannot take care of their kids anymore. And so the parents send their children off to these schoolhouses, which is the setting of the first book. And these young heroes are nothing but 12, 13, 14 years old, and they realize the world that they had been living in was not as it should have been. And they just discover a world that was worth defending. And part of it is this truth, this culture that was once lost, and then they were rediscovering it.
Yeah. Let's not lose that thread.
Okay.
Because I do want to talk about that very thing, Lepidus and what else you've worked on. But a little bit more about you. You live in Virginia.
Yes.
And obviously you haven't always lived there because the Army would not work out that way for you.
Right.
Where else have you lived?
So our very first active duty station was actually Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, which was a night and day, reality check for my bride, because the farthest that she had ever been away from her home, which is in Fredericksburg, was 2 hours away. Right. And so here we are. We moved from Virginia to Colorado, huge game change. But we had a wonderful community out there, great experience. So then we went to Colorado to Hawaii, which is a big cultural shock there. You're kind of in this island in the middle of the ocean, and you're not going home all the time, right? And so, we lived there for 3 years, and it was a blessing. I got back into sailing. I'm big into sailing, and we as a family just love the water, so it just worked out. And then we went from we spent about only 6 months at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, but we went to Fort Bliss, Texas, which is the complete adverse to Hawaii. I mean, you're talking, a 5-minute rain is a monsoon over there. So,
yeah.
But that, it's, I always like to share with people, the desert is gorgeous 2 times a day. In between that, maybe not so much for me, but sunrise and sunset, gorgeous and stunning, right? But
there's
a lot of good people over there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, around where you live now, is there a special place you like to go and get away and kind of just refresh your soul, recharge your batteries, rejuvenate?
Yeah. So where we live is actually only about 30 minutes from Williamsburg, Yorktown. There's a lot of history here. And I love history. So sometimes I'll just go to the battlefields and kind of walk around. I took my daughter out to Yorktown. We saw the sunrise together. And the unit that I'm in is actually it's a boat unit. So we send boats and vehicles all over the globe. And so we have our own port. And so just being, for me, again, I'm a water rat. So being close to the water is very therapeutic to me. And so that's, how I kind of rejuvenate. The other thing is I have a unique, and I'm sure somebody's going to judge me for this, but that's okay. I have a very unique Sabbath ritual, which is Saturday morning. I wake up about 5 in the morning, and then I make one cup of coffee. I grab a cigar. I go in the backyard, and there's just silence, and that's kind of my go-to. Is no music, no reading, nothing. Just my coffee cup, my cigar, or my tobacco pipe, and I like to joke with people. I'm waiting to see if Gandalf is going to show up, but that's just my quiet time, my little sanctuary where I kind of reflect on the week, and try to just again have that Sabbath time, the time with our Maker. So
yeah. Well, you mentioned there's no music there, but if there was, what are your 3 favorite songs?
oh my goodness, my 3 favorite songs. I don't know if I have them.
Well, it changes from one day to the next. At least mine do.
Yeah. If I were to pick a hymn, it's a tie between "Abide with Me" and "Firm Foundation." And I really like all sorts of genres. I love instrumental music, in part because I can kind of see a story unfold, with the music and stuff. I'll be honest, lately I've been listening to more, audiobooks or, sermons and stuff, when I'm at the gym and stuff like that. But I do love music, and my kids certainly appreciate music. But yeah, I would say "Abide with Me" certainly is what is mentally kind of always through my mind.
Well, I ask this question to all my guests, and some feel like, oh, this is a Christian fiction podcast. I have to have something Christian. But, some of my favorite stuff is from Van Morrison.
Yeah.
Some of that old, good, classic rock and roll stuff.
Yeah.
Also like CC Winans and The Goodness of God, things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, your 3 favorite songs don't have to be evangelical or Christian oriented. Right. What about your 3 favorite movies?
Oh my goodness, 3 favorite movies. Jeez.
Yeah, I'm making you work.
I would say, if I were to really pin the tail on the donkey for 3 favorite movies, Hook is just a good classic movie, with the late Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. Hook, the Chronicles of Narnia series always kind of gets me, but then also the Fellowship of the Rings. I love the beginning of things, and I really love. Of course, neither one of them fits this category, but I love really anything dystopian. Hence, my writing genre. But
sure,
I love just to see how society pivots into those settings, but then also really how do the characters pivot into those moments, right? But gosh, Hook is always a good classic movie. And if I were to pick another really fun one to watch, the Rocketeer. That's a fun, good classic movie. It's a fun little setting movie that there's not too much. There's just enough drama.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, would you share with us your walk with Christ? How did you come to know the Lord?
Yeah. So I was always raised with a Christian family, and my parents, I've always known them to take us to church or chapel services. And they've always, hosted a small group. They, from a child's eye, they knew everything about God.
Yeah.
And, for their high school graduation present to me, they were going to send me to a 2-week Christian camp. And I fought them for it because I was like, what are you talking about? Like my
Yeah.
friends, they're getting brand new cars. They're getting all this stuff. And you're sending me to VBS school? Like, no way, I'm not going at all. And they really taught me a lot about apologetics as well. So I knew a lot of not just theology, but how do you defend the faith? How do you have conversations with people? And when I went to this Christian camp, which by the way, during this time, I was extremely active in paintball. I was a semi-professional paintballer, and we went all the way up and down the East Coast, just playing, the competitive matches and stuff like that. Excuse me. And so I relented to go to this Christian camp because paintball was one of the activities that you could do. So I was like, well, fine, I'm going to play paintball
Yeah.
every day. And I went to
Yeah.
this camp, and there were some tremendous speakers, and really just the Lord had convicted me that, if I were to die right then, I would be going to hell. And,
Yeah.
again, I was a pretty successful young man, and, again, I was a semi-professional athlete. I'd already started a small company of selling, paintball supplies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was a manager at, the company that I was working at. And so I kind of had it all set in my mind. And I just knew, the Bible says that the sword of the Lord is that it's a double-edged sword, and so my belief is one side of that sword convicts, the other side of that sword redeems. And that's what happened. And I just knew. And, I shared this, that as soon as I, raised my hand, went up to the front, I hid in the bathroom and I just wept. And
Yeah.
people were congratulating me, but I realized I had been faking it for years as a Christian. And I was so ashamed of my testimony that for years I was a fraud. I mean, and I had been on missionaries and, missions trips, and, I would speak, at youth camps and stuff like that, just amongst peers and so forth. And I just realized I had been a fraud. And, the Lord is gracious and patient, with all people, to include his church especially. And I just realized that I was going to hell. And what was what was really forthcoming about my transformation was I went to a community college after high school. And my English teacher in high school also taught English at the community college, and she could tell that there was this change. And so I was able to share my testimony with her. And, again, I was very active in paintball. And so I was able to, the Lord worked, through me with some of the younger players and athletes to just share again my testimony, and just, it was truly as if the scales had dropped from my eyes, and I just saw the whole world change. So here I am.
That's amazing. Billy Graham said it. He's here to save the Christians.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a lot of us that, because of what we do, we think we're saved. And
Yeah.
we don't really accept what Christ has done, which is why we're saved. It has nothing to do with what we do. We just have to believe and
Yeah.
accept that gift. And it sounds easy, but it's an amazing thing when you experience it. That okay, There's more to being a Christian than just mouthing the words.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I would say, the hardest for me, and this is a subtle undercurrent theme in my book, is the aspect of adoption within God's family, right? Because the Bible is very clear. Paul, writes about this, that once we were children of darkness, but now we're children of light. And, once,
Right.
we had no God, but now, he is our God. And this adoption as sons and daughters, that theological belief that we're not just transformed, but adopted into the fold, I think is the
Right.
hardest to truly accept. And I try to explain that to people that, when it says that you have a whole new heart, you have a whole new life, it's not just an upgraded version of you. It's the fact that you are now a new child, and it's a whole new person, that you're adopted into this a family. And what's so beautiful about it is even today, somebody gets adopted and they get a whole new social security number, they get a whole new birth certificate. They've been completely remade under the headship of the new parents. And it's the same thing with our Heavenly Father, is that we're completely remade. The old has passed, the new has come.
Yeah.
And here we are. And yet that's kind of the hardest thing to truly accept and live by. And yet it's just such a beautiful reality of our salvation.
Not to diminish children that come from their parents, the biological parents, and are always with them, but those parents didn't select. You weren't selected by your parents.
Yeah.
But when you're adopted into God's family, He knows you and chose you anyway.
That's right.
That's just so hard to comprehend. It's we're our own worst enemies sometimes.
We are. And, and part of it is because we know our own past, and Satan knows our past.
Yeah.
And so, Satan loves to say, listen, man, you're not worthy. And the harsh truth is we're not,
Exactly.
and if we accept that reality, we're not worthy of any of this. I think we can understand grace a little bit better. And Jesus even told his disciples, you did not choose me, but I chose you, and you hold the keys to the kingdom. And it's not, and modern churches don't always have steeples. And so this might be a lost metaphor to future generations. But, part of it is becoming a steeple. The closer you get to God, per se, the smaller you become, but the sharper you get. And so you get, more refined. And, one of my favorite quotes from Narnia is when Lucy goes to Aslan, and she was hesitant, at some point, and Lucy admits, well, you're so big, Aslan, like you've grown. And Aslan says, every year you grow, so shall I. And it's just this beautiful, metaphor of just the more we grow in our faith and our understanding of who God is and his plan of salvation, his will, the larger he becomes. It's not like we can get to this, level 20 Christian where we can grasp God. We realize that there's so much more to him than we could even fathom.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Matthew, what sparked your calling to write Christian fiction? I mean, people don't, everyone has an assignment. Part of your assignment, evidently, is to share biblical principles in fiction stories, fictional stories. How did you know to start doing that?
Well, I don't think I did. For a long time. I'm not going to lie. I'm not trying to overly spiritualize it, but I was sitting at church, and I was listening to the choir sing, and I couldn't even tell you what song it was, but I was completely overcome with the song, and I could see the very ending of a story. And I just knew like
Yeah.
this is a story that has to be, sown and written. And I'll tell you what though, Mike, Satan is very convincing because I really was plagued with doubt. I was plagued with a lot of self-criticism. Again, I shared earlier that I was obese, I was really heavy.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of, character, or not character, but criticisms with that. And I just, I would dabble in writing and write, but then just kind of, nobody's going to read this stupid book, and, and just walk away from it. And then I would get called back to it. And the first book really took me over 15 years to get it all together. And it was COVID that finally pushed me to publish it.
Yeah.
Part of it is because I had some free time. And,
right. As we
and
all
it
do.
was, just the stars aligned, if you will. But I think also being a chaplain and youth pastor and then father really pushed me to do it, because a lot of the characters in my book are real life. And then the other characters in the book series are individuals that I've known or experiences that I've had with individuals as a chaplain. And so I wanted to merge the two together. And in all reality, if we as God-fearing individuals don't write fiction, other people will. And generally speaking, if it's not God-fearing individuals, it's going to shape culture in a way that I don't want my kids or future generations and posterity to inherit. And I truly believe in this, Mike, that books shape the human heart before they shape human history. And I truly believe that Christians should be involved with literature and writing and spreading it and infusing those values, those principles of truth and just the value of life within books. Not all of them have to be fiction, but a lot of times it can be, and it can be immensely powerful. And so, my entire adult life, I've really worked with the younger generation, and I've seen them almost be in a state of just longing to have a modern day Frodo, if you will, somebody who is willing to have moral courage, though tempted as Frodo is in his own stories, right? But there's a community of characters that help him along the way. And I think we need that these days. I think we need modern Frodos to kind of invoke that courage, that need for community, the need to speak truth. That old adage of, good versus evil is always beneficial to write about, but to re-spark courageous hearts in culture is just paramount and crucial.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I probably say this in every interview I do, but the very first Christian fiction author was Jesus before there were even Christians.
Yeah.
His parables were fiction, but they taught us a lesson quite simply and clearly. And the world is teaching the readers how to react to all kinds of different situations. Biblical.
Right.
Christian authors can write the same kind of stories, but they have a higher calling to answer to.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that they say, okay, I'm going to make this good.
Yeah.
It's because how else could they?
Right.
How could a Christian come up with something that's serving of the devil?
Right.
I don't know. Christian have an assignment, and I just so appreciate everyone that's following the assignment.
No, again, look at the New Testament. What does it say? Whatever you do, do for the glory of God. And
Exactly.
we should be teaching matters of eternity, matters of right and wrong, that there is a truth that's absolute. And I'm not going to say that it's easy to incorporate it in fictionary writing, but you can. And that you can call out things in very powerful ways without being too political or too gray. That there's a truth that should be pursued, that there's a purpose, that there's a value to life. And again, if we individuals who are God-fearing don't write, somebody else will. And so
yeah.
why not fill the shelves with good writing that's not, mamsy-pamsy, if you will, but wrestle with hard realities of pain and suffering and grief and the trials in life, and yet see redemption and forgiveness and grace woven into the storylines, and to see, that all people can be redeemed.
Yeah.
And there's consequences for our actions, and just, and I do have I would like to challenge Christian authors to not just, tout, biblical themes. Well, okay. I mean, what does that really mean? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
To me, I think there's a difference between a biblical theme book, Christian fiction, because to me, biblical themed is, you're drawing something from the prophets or something, you're turning it into a narrative, which can be kind of dangerous. But anyway, my ADD mind is getting of me. But simply put, I think it's paramount, because again, books can shape human hearts more than we realize.
What we've really been talking about in this first part isn't just books. It's identity. It's discipline. It's what it means to live the Christian life when no one's applauding and when the culture is pushing in the opposite direction. Christian fiction reinforces faith. Stories don't save us, but they remind us of what the truth looks like when it's lived out. In part 2, we're going to pick this back up and talk about community, responsibility, compassion, and especially well-written Christian fiction matter in shaping hearts before they ever shape culture. Here, take what you've heard, sit with it this week, and then come back for part 2 as Matthew and I continue this conversation about faith, fiction, and living out what we believe.